All right, we are here at UH in the Insect Museum, and we have Tiara. What's your last name?
My name is Tiara Stark, and I'm a research associate at the Insect Museum.
Okay, and we have Dr. Rubinoff.
Dr. Dan Rubinoff. I'm a professor of entomology at the University of Hawaii.
Can you tell us what
director of
entomology is?
Entomology is the study of insects.
Oh, cool.
And we're in the University of Hawaii Insect Museum, which has 250,000 specimens, actually more than that now, from all over the world, but mostly we focus on Hawaii because there are a lot of endemic species here, that is, species found nowhere else, and there's not enough people working on them. We're still describing lots of new species. We have a paper coming out very soon which has 6 new species of moth that have never been seen before from Kaho'olawe. So even little places like that have new species of moth just found in Hawaii, and so that's a lot of what we do is trying to figure them out, where are they, and also look at their evolution. So that's another aspect of what we do here.
Cool. Tiara, can you tell us a little bit about your work, maybe?
Sure. So we're actually in our 3rd year of the digitization project, and so what we're doing is we're digitizing the entire collection. And basically what that entails is imaging each insect specimen and their associated data labels. I don't know if you want to catch a glimpse of
come on over and check it out.
action. And so this is kind of majority of the work that our undergraduates do, which is imaging the specimens and their labels. And then we have volunteers transcribe those data labels. And
So is each one of those a different species of...
no, so this entire tray is this species.
Okay.
Yeah. And so sometimes we'll have trays that are identified to the species level or just the family, depending on if we've had an expert to come in and identify them. And so we're just trying to get all of this collection data onto a database so it can be accessed by the public and other entomologists who might be interested in insect biodiversity throughout Hawaii.
Since not everyone has access to the real specimens.
Exactly,
right?
yeah. Because a lot of people live in the mainland or in other countries, and so if it's online, it's way easier for everyone.
Can you tell us a little bit about the insect diversity in Hawaii? How many species of insects do we have here? Do you know?
I believe we have, is it around 5,000?
Probably more like 10,000.
10,000?
5,000
Okay,
to
sorry, yeah,
10,000.
I'm actually,
Just in Hawaii alone.
Yeah, endemic to Hawaii, yeah, we think.
And can you tell us what endemic means?
I actually mentioned that already. It means
Oh,
found here
sorry.
and nowhere else. You're just excited, I think.
I know, I was excited.
Right, so that's a debatable thing, though. Tiara could be right, I could be right. So there is some leniency between the two. But we know
it's
that.
like we've identified something like 1 million species of insects, but there could be up to...
Oh yeah, there's way more than that.
Yeah.
I think 2 to 3 million is the lowest possible estimate.
Okay.
They're thinking
So the
well over
numbers
10
have
million.
a big range because there's so much diversity, right?
And that there's so little known.
Okay.
That's the other part of the problem. Yeah, so moths alone in Hawaii are probably close to 2,000 species.
2,000
Yeah,
species
and-
of moths?
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty safe one. And then on top of that, and most of those are unknown. I'd say almost, if it's not most, it's 45% to 55%. We might know 55% of them and 45% are still undescribed.
So how do you come up with that number 2,000 then?
So in Hyposmacoma, one genus that I work on, which is probably the most diverse genus, we think there's probably about 700 species.
Wow.
And
Within that one genus, there's
and then
700 species.
Right, and then you got to figure there's a bunch of other groups that I'm aware of that are as poorly known as Hyposmacoma, and even if they have half that many, when I put them all together, I cross 1,000 very quickly and get very close to 2,000, and then there's a bunch of stuff that we probably don't know nearly as well.
Can you give me an example of how you would differentiate between 2 species of that same genus?
So actually, that was a real problem early on when they were trying to work on them because they recognized they were different, but the genitalia, the dissection of the genitalia, was not proving to be very useful, and that's something that is traditionally used. So
Okay.
for since the 1600s, people have dissected the butts of moths and looked at them and seen differences that they could then use to assign them to different species.
Okay. So you classify moths based on their butts, basically.
Not just on their butts,
Okay.
based on their larvae, based on the adult, and then now based on DNA. And that's been really useful. In fact, we've been able to make breakthroughs that were never possible beforehand in understanding diversity in Hawaii using DNA. A moth that was thought to be one species across all the islands, we're now realizing is differentiated
Several
very.
different species.
Each island has its own. So we're going to look at some endemic Hawaiian insects, and if you come closer, you can have a peek. Within the class Insecta, the order Lepidoptera is probably the 2nd or 3rd most diverse. The most diverse is the beetles.
Huh.
The 2nd most diverse is probably the flies, And the third might be, in fact, Lepidoptera, butterflies and moths. But some people, especially the ones who work on wasps and bees, would say that they're more diverse. So there's a debate going on. But anyway, we're going to focus on a few of those different orders in Hawaii. Here is the state butterfly, the Kamehameha butterfly. And there's only one other native species of butterfly here, and that's Blackburn's blue, which is right there. And you can see pictures of them next to each one. If we take the case, we have these locks here to prevent bugs from getting in.
How ironic.
Yes, bugs that will eat the bugs. If you look on the underside of the Blackburn's blue, it has a little bit of green, and that is a pretty neat thing. Both of these butterflies probably have their nearest relatives in Southeast Asia. Here is another radiation of endemic moths. Omiodes is the genus there. And then these are Hyles. That's a genus of moth also. And both of these have relatives all over the world, particularly Hyles. There are Hyles in Australia, all across Europe, North America, South America. But Hawaii has its own radiation with probably 5 species that are found nowhere else. I'll leave the top off so you can see what's going on. If we go down here, this is the famous koa bug, which is not nearly as common as it used to be, because back before biological control was carefully monitored and done by scientists, some people brought in a fly pest that attacks a pest bug that's related to this, but it also attacks the koa bug. And so it has literally eaten them out of a lot of the places they used to be. It's still around, but it's not nearly as common. Here we have Hawaiian Drosophila. These are related to the fruit flies that you might see in your house. Hopefully you can see how much bigger these are. They are giants of their group. Hawaii has the most diversity of Drosophila in the world. We have over 1,000 species of Drosophila. So we are the center of the world's diversity in Drosophila. And they do lots of crazy things here. Probably more time than I'd have if we had a whole class for a whole semester on it. But they do some really neat things.
Can you tell us maybe one or two of them?
One neat thing, if you look at these guys here, they have giant hammerheads. Those are the males. And if you come this way, you'll be able to get them. But they bash each other in the head just like bighorn rams to compete for females.
Interesting.
So, yeah, that's an unusual thing for a fly to do. And here they've evolved to do that. Other ones have very complicated courtship procedures. And here in this picture, you can see the comparison of the Hawaiian Drosophila to the Drosophila you get all over the rest of the world.
So the ones in Hawaii are much larger.
They can be much, much larger, yeah. As we move up here, we have the vecu bug. Here's a picture of it, and here's the actual thing. That insect lives only above 9,000 feet on the Mauna Kea volcano on Big Island. It's the only place in the world it occurs. It's a predator, so it tracks down other insects that have been immobilized by the cold up on top of Mauna Kea, and it sucks them dry. All of its relatives are harmless seed eaters, and it has somehow become this vampire in the mountains.
Well, it can't really be much of a seed eater at that high of altitude, right? There's not as much vegetation.
Yeah, there's almost no vegetation up there. That's true, that's true. And then we're getting into my favorite group here. This is Hyposmacoma. There are probably at least, I would say, and people can argue, 700 or 800 species in this group. Every single island has its own species of Hyposmacoma. There are no species found on more than one island. And in fact, 100% of the species we found in the Ko'olaus are only found in the Ko'olaus, and the Waianais are only found in the Waianais. So there's a lot of diversity in this group of tiny moths. One of the coolest ones is the snail-eating caterpillar. And each island has its own species of snail-eating caterpillar. This is the only place on the planet where there are caterpillars that attack and eat snails. It doesn't occur anywhere else on the planet, and it occurs in Hawaii in this very special group that we have. So that's pretty spiffy. I could go on and on because this is my favorite group.
Why are they your favorite?
Because of things like that. They also have aquatic caterpillars that swim underwater and eat algae, and that's a very rare thing for the rest of the world, and yet it's happened multiple times in Hawaii. And then just their general diversity. Everywhere you go, or before maybe we got too involved as people and changed the landscape, everywhere from the blowhole on Oahu, which is right next to the ocean, all the way up to 9,000 feet on Mauna Kea, you can find Hyposmacoma that are evolved into those specific places.
Specialized to be in that environment.
Yeah. It's a spectacular example of evolution, like incredible. And they may just look like little moths, but what they do and what their caterpillars do is really incredible.
So can you tell us a little bit about their life cycle?
Sure. the caterpillar life cycle, which is here also, these are all caterpillars, Lepidoptera. They're called holometabolous insects, and that's a fancy word for saying that they have a larva that looks nothing like the adult.
So they go through metamorphosis.
That's right. Yeah, they go through metamorphosis. They have a pupa. And the life cycle of Hyposmocoma is to carry around a little case, and here are the cases of the larvae. Just like a hermit crab would have a shell, these guys make their own cases from silk and carry them around with them while they feed and grow. And when they get big enough, they pupate inside their case and then pop out as a moth and fly away. So it's a very cute thing. And you can see this one here is pretty much the biggest species of Hyposmocoma. And there are ones smaller than this even. There are two on that. There are ones that are even smaller than that, even when they're mature. So they have a big range of size, even at maturity. And that's pretty unusual. That, if you look here, there are 3 of these guys next to one of those. And these are easily, 20 of these could go into one of those.
Yeah.
So that's a big range for the same genus. And they are the same genus. They all came from one relative that landed in Hawaii probably 15 million years ago and then evolved and radiated down the islands. So there's a lot of really cool stories involving Hyposmocoma here.
So why did you decide to study insects?
That's actually a funny story because I grew up in Berkeley, California, which is a foggy place in the summer and actually still fairly dry. So there wasn't a lot of stuff around, and I was really into finding stuff. So I'd spend a lot of time roaming the neighborhood looking for snakes and lizards and frogs, and I could go weeks and not find any. And in fact, I almost never found any. I found one frog in my yard once, and when I was 4, I found one snake, and that's it, except for a few salamanders. And so when I was in 8th grade, somebody introduced me to insects, and all of a sudden I could find them everywhere. And that was really exciting. And I had known about insects beforehand, but now really working on them and developing a collection like this was super exciting. And I was finding cool stuff. And then everywhere else I went, I found cool stuff. And so it just started from that and kept going. And I checked out other groups. I worked on birds for a little while, and honestly, compared to insects, they're boring. Let's be honest. There's really nothing that matches the diversity and the cool stuff that they do. So it was an easy choice for me to keep working on insects.
Hi, my name is Brad. I am a graduate student of Dan Rubinoff's, hoping to pursue a PhD
In entomology?
in entomology.
Okay.
Yep, and I work over here in the museum a little bit, but my lab is down.
Okay. And we want to know, Ms. Sanaboni's 8th grade class wants to know, what's your favorite insect defense mechanism?
So my favorite insect defense mechanism is that of the bombardier beetle.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you'll find some really great photos and images if you look it up. But the bombardier beetle has 2 different organs in its abdomen, and they hold different chemicals. And when the chemicals are mixed together, the result is explosive. So there's a very rapid release of heat and energy, and it kind of shoots this really, really hot chemical at its whatever is attacking it, whatever predator is attacking it, right? And so it curves its abdomen down underneath the body so that it doesn't hit itself, and it shoots it wherever it wants to.
So it can kind of aim its fire.
It aims it at the assailant, and it's really hot and kind of like.
So have you ever described any new species of insects?
I have. Myself and as part of my lab, we've described dozens of new species, mostly moths, but also some fruit flies, species of fruit fly from other parts of the world.
And you mentioned you discovered a new genus?
Indeed, Diedra.
Diedra.
Diedra is the name of the genus. It's found in the American West,
Okay.
and I did that when I was as part of my grad studies.
Wow.
When I was getting my PhD. So I described 2 new species and a new genus.
Good
Diedra.
dissertation topic.
It was part of my dissertation, actually.
How do you come up with a name for a new genus or a new species?
Actually, we just had to do that. We just described 9 new species from Kaho'olawe.
Okay.
And I just was reviewing that paper before you came today.
Oh.
We usually base it on either something the caterpillar or the moth does that's remarkable, the place it's from, or a combination of the 2. Every once in a while you'll describe something after somebody in honor of them. So I might describe something as Powell-i after my PhD or my postdoc advisor, Jerry Powell, in honor of him, to thank him for all the teaching he did for me. So that's often a motivation. But if you have a caterpillar that does something interesting, like the snail-eating caterpillars from before, one of the species from Maui, we named Snail's Nightmare in Hawaiian. Mo'oheva, I think is how you'd say it.
Okay.
But it's because the caterpillar attacks and eats snails, so that's a memorable way to commemorate both it being a Hawaiian species and to tell people a little bit about what it does. So they can be fairly colorful. They don't always have to be worn.
Yeah. But they can describe, they tell you a little bit about the species.
Ideally they'll tell you about the species or be in honor of somebody. They'll have something more to them. I kind of hate names like Occidentalis, which just means Western. It just doesn't say that much. So
Yeah.
there's an opportunity that not everybody takes to do something a little bit more fun.
Of the 9 species that you just described, what's your favorite species name?
I wouldn't say I have one. One of them, we used the term ghost child in Hawaiian, which I'm not going to try and pronounce. But and we did that because we found the adult moths, but we never found the larva. And so we know it's out there, but we can't find it. It's like a ghost.
Interesting. It's a ghost child. The
Yes.
child stage, the larval stage.
Right, is because the larval stage is still unknown to us. It's like a ghost.
What will happen when you discover it?
Exactly.
You have to rename
No,
it.
it always had that memory where people always know that the larva was hard to find at first. And so it tells a little bit of a story.
Yeah.
Even hopefully 100 years from now when we know the larva, we'll still remember back when the first idiots who were trying to work on it couldn't find it. Couldn't find it, and that'll
Turns
be
out
part
it
of
was
the
right under the dirt.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So that's kind of what you do. And then there's a little bit of humility in that. You know, like we know that hopefully somebody will find it eventually and that they'll look back and think, silly us.
Yeah.
But that's part of the fun. And you can communicate that to other generations. You
That's
know,
cool.
I
So
may
there's
be dead.
definitely some creativity involved.
Yeah, in fact, it's in some ways one of the toughest parts because you want it to be a good name, and it's a struggle to figure out what it will be.
It will
So-
last hundreds of years.
Yeah,
That's a
exactly.
lot of pressure.